high level 10,000 foot overview of JourneyTEAM, we've got about 120 plus members of our business, about 300 plus active customers in the last 12 months. We've been around for about 27 years, been Microsoft Partner of the Year the last couple of years in a row, so two-time winner of that. We've got some really nice gold and silver competencies, and we've won Best Place to Work 3 times now. So really cool place to work. We're mostly located here in Draper, Utah, about 20 minutes south of Salt Lake City, but we've got a couple of associates spread out across the country as well. So we are a Microsoft shop. We operate only on the Microsoft stack. We have different teams. You will be talking with Jesse and Cecily, who are part of the ERP team, but we also have a full CRM team, a cloud team, a data and BI team, a SharePoint team. That all are within the business. So these are some of the things that we specialize in, some of the work that we do on a regular basis.
So today's topic, going to kind of go into the attributes and the characteristics of building a successful ERP implementation team. We have a lot of different clients we work with, and we do have some great success stories, and we also have some maybe not so successful stories. So as a group internally, kind of put our heads together to determine, what are some of the main characteristics that we need for a project to be successful. So that's going to be the topic of today. No type of demo. There's not going to be any applications we're sharing. It's more just a conversation around the best approach for this. So to start off, quick introductions. Cecily, I'll let you go first.
Ladies before gentlemen. See how you are?
Yes.
I was going to say age before, but hey.
I was going to add that too, but I decided not to.
It's okay. It's okay. So I've been with JourneyTEAM for about 21 years, so a little bit of time. Love the company. And I started my my career as an accountant in a company where I was kind of put in charge of doing implementations. So that's kind of where I got my taste and flavor for the desire to do implementations. I could see the power that doing process flows and getting people to do things a certain way, get rid of that double entry and finding applications that would help the process rather than me being so manually driven and so double entry and all that fun stuff. So I got a flavor for that in that company, decided I liked it, and shortly after started my career in consulting. So I've got 22 plus years of consulting experience, 25 years in accounting. I started working with GP. So if any of you are familiar with Microsoft GP, that's the program that I have done the most support on. And over the last couple of years, I've moved to Dynamics Business Central. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, a little bit of background on my end. Don't have quite the experience Cecily does, but she is also old enough to be my mother, so we kind of joke around that she's my work mom. My experience, been with JourneyTEAM going on 3 years now. Before that, I was in the accounting side of things. Started out in AP, kind of worked my way up, eventually was a controller for a company that owned about 150 restaurants. We were part of, we were using QuickBooks when I joined on, and we actually brought in JourneyTEAM to do an implementation to Great Plains. Cecily was the lead consultant on that, and I was very impressed with what JourneyTEAM did, and it was very interesting to me. So at that point, I found an opening and moved over to JourneyTEAM. Hobbies, kind of like what I like to do. I've got a side-by-side UTV, and anytime it's decent weather, usually out doing that and have my dogs with me. So a little bit of background on myself. So now we kind of want to get into the meat of what this presentation is going to be. Now, the focus of this is to address, the characteristics of a successful project. So we figured it would be best to first kind of outline how our projects are built and how we'll move through this process. So kind of break it into 5 different steps. So the first step would be the project kickoff. So this is where we sit down with the client, kind of go over the initial estimate of work, kind of understand, what's at store, what are we trying to accomplish with this project, and then we dive into the second step, which is discovery. This is where we'll take a look at your current system, the current processes that you're doing, try to determine a very clear understanding of where you would like to be at the end of this. We have a concept of flag plants. I will talk about that a little bit later in the slide deck, but ideally that is, what is the end goal? We like to clearly illustrate that as soon as possible. So as we move through the project, we are on track with trying to hit that goal. The next step of this, the step 3, is the execution. This is the meat of the whole project. This area of the process can take anywhere from 4 to 9 months. This is where we are doing workshops, training you guys on your system, your process, how that's going to look inside the new ERP system. We've got, like I said, workshops that we do. We'll meet 2 to 3 times a week. There's also a UAT session where we're getting your system, your environment created with your data. And then the step 4 of this is the heavy UAT process. So this would be the conversion, when we actually go live. JourneyTEAM does involve in, the first month closing process with you, address any issues that come up, make sure all our reporting and everything is good. And then the final step would be the project closure. So this is where we reference back to the flag plant we defined in phases or steps 1 and 2. We make sure that did we complete that flag plant? We also like to do a project retrospective to look back and try to get feedback. Obviously, every client, every situation can be unique, and so we like to try to learn from each of these projects and improve our process internally. And then we will shift the support over to our internal support team. So that is a high-level summary of the Business Central project. As you can see in this illustration in the bottom left, we do operate in sprints. So we kind of have an agile method to this approach. So we plan out 2 weeks at a time. We're not trying to plan, every workshop for a full 4 months, but we just focus on the current spread at hand. What are our objectives of the current spread, and then kind of plan out what we aim to do in the following sprint.
Yeah, I'll kind of add a little bit there for you, Jesse. One of the things that we find with projects is that if you go through and plan out a project and you say, okay, I'm going to do this on this date for the whole 6 months. We find that when you're doing an implementation like an ERP implementation, that sometimes things might take a little bit longer. So if you plan that whole 6 to 7 months out and you've got everything booked and you know exactly what you're doing on every single date, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to have things that are going to slip, and it's going to be a failure for a project because you didn't make the time frame of what you said you were going to do. So that's why we really like to focus on sprint-focused, agile-focused projects. Yes, we know that there's a date that we're working towards, and we have that date. We know what we're working towards as far as a go-live date. But we definitely try to do things more of an agile process where we're saying, all right, you need to do your chart of accounts. It should be done on this date. But we find out that there's a whole lot of things that need to be changed on that. So we need to push that a little bit. So agile projects seem to flow a little bit better with this type of projects that we do. And that's why we've kind of driven those projects that way.
Awesome. Thank you. Very valuable content there. Speaking from experience. Okay. We tried to summarize kind of the main 5 topics that we think are the most critical to this being a success. And we do have a slide for each of these, so I'm actually just going to pull all these up. We talk about accountability, making sure our team members are accountable. Decision making, obviously, as we're moving through a process, any decisions can affect timeline. We want to talk about adaptability and your guys' ability to adapt to a new process. The understanding of your business knowledge. if you have this documented, can be very helpful. And then we will talk a little bit more about the flag plant. So diving into the first one, accountability. If we talk about accountability, the definition of that is taking responsibility for something that you have done or something you're supposed to do. So, as we're going through this project, there is going to be a lot of tasks that are assigned on both ends. We are going to have things on the JourneyTEAM side, but we're also going to have things that we need you as the client to be doing. So, accountability, technical tasks are going to be assigned throughout the project. We estimate anywhere from about 6 to 10 hours of the client's time that we need for a successful project. Depending on the complexities, this obviously can increase or decrease. And then I just kind of have some examples of some tasks that may come from some of these workshops. So we may ask you to verify and update the payment methods inside the system. We may need you to design and test different financial reports. Testing business processes. So going from, the cash or the quote to cash process. This can be, a simple task that may take 15, 20 minutes, or it may be, a longer drawn out process that, maybe takes a couple hours. And so having team members accountable, if I expect that, I gave this assignment out, by our next session, we can review, address any questions that come of it. If your team is not accountable for those deadlines and those different tasks that get assigned, obviously that's going to be a waterfall, approach where we're going to have to start pushing things further and further back based on, the accountability that we're currently experiencing. Another area, as we talk through the different phases in the project, is the UAT. We have had many projects go very successful if we have a very heavy engagement in the UAT process. We have some clients that actually prefer to kind of do what we call a soft go live. And really what that means is, that last month before we turn on Business Central, we actually have you operating in your legacy system and the new system simultaneously. So that kind of eases the blow of, moving into a new system because you've already been doing it for a month. And so, the accountability comes in there because, if we're doing a soft go live, we need every person that is involved in the accounting process to be accountable for their testing, their process, making sure that they've, worked out any of the bugs with their specific scenario. So accountability, I would say, is probably one of the top characteristics that is critical. Cecily, anything you wanted to add on the accountability side? You're on mute.
Helps if I talk in the microphone. Sorry.
Yes.
No, I was gonna say, no, I think you got that one really good. I think accountability is the one piece that when we are working with clients, we talk a lot about. So no, I think you got it good.
Okay, awesome. Next one we want to address is the decision making. We have had some situations with clients, if we don't have the decision makers involved in the project, we can delay. Any decision that gets delayed in this process does cause downstream effects. And so kind of throw out some examples of, different areas where key decisions are to be made. So, if you guys have a current business process, maybe the new system can make that more automated. Maybe, in the near future, it's going to be less automated. And so we will need users to, be able to clearly define, what decisions are going to be made around the business process. Because we can't really do any further testing if we do not have those decisions made. With Business Central, there is also a lot of third-party applications. So, Business Central has its core functionality that has a lot of different things you can do. But there are third-party extensions that bring in added functionality inside the system. So, we may need the ability to process credit card transactions, maybe a click-to-pay type invoice. That is getting a third party involved. Usually there is a whole project involved with that third party. And so, if we don't have that decision made early on in the process and that credit card solution is not ready to go, that's going to delay the entire go live of the project. Other critical decisions would be any change orders. We mentioned in the discovery phase, we do our best approach at trying to understand everything that is going to come in this project. But there is sometimes change orders that need to be addressed. Maybe a different process that gets uncovered during discovery after the estimate of work has been signed. So those change orders, obviously before we can move forward with more processing, we've got to get the authorization to be able to spend those additional hours. And one last note that I want to add to this, Cecily, before you chime in here, is we need to make sure that we have the right people involved in the decision. So we can't have, the accounting department on the workshop making decisions of how the warehouse is going to process, their day-to-day operations. So not just being able to get the decisions made fast, but we need to make sure that the right people are making these decisions.
Yep, I was just going to kind of hit that point, that last point that you made there. So I have an example of two different scenarios that we have, I don't know that recently, but through my time of working with JourneyTEAM that we have had. One of them was a client that wanted to just really have a lot of control. And so they only allowed the accountants to be in our first initial discoveries and our initial information as far as the process flows that we went through. So we went on the assumption of everything that the accountant had given us as far as the process flows. And we got all the way through the project. And at the very end project, when we were doing the UATs, they were like, hey, let's pull in some of the end users. As they pulled in the end users and we were going through some processes, there were some extremely big changes that had to be made to those processes. And so we'd gone through the whole project, 3 months of setting up and doing all this implementation to only have to turn around and change the way that we did things. Now, thank goodness we did the end user acceptance with the correct people. We were able to correct that very easily and go back and rechange things. On the flip side of that, I had another company who, when we did the discovery, there was like 10 people on the call. Now, sometimes that can be a little overwhelming to have that many people on the call. You have all these people chiming in on the different things that they're doing. But at the same time, what happened with that project is that, the accountant thought, oh, well, we do the process this way because we need this information financially. Well, the warehouse team says, well, we need to do it this way because we've got to get this and this information. We were able to talk those processes through, come to a solution that worked for everybody, and design the project out. And it went really pretty seamlessly all the way through the project, even through the end user acceptance, because we had collaborated right from the beginning. So very critical to have the right people in those discoveries and those first sessions. Even if you think, hey, this is going to be boring for them, you never know what information they're going to give us that will help to do that implementation.
Yes, very, very helpful to have, there may be someone involved in some of these workshops where, they're only needed for 5 or 10 minutes of the conversation, but if we do not get that information out of that person, it can definitely cause other problems if we have determined a process, and then we've got to go back and change that process. Okay. Next area I wanted to focus on is the adaptability. So this is the trait that allows someone to change according to the need or the environment. So the big thing we see on adaptability is business processes changing. There may be certain things that become more efficient. One of the examples on this is Business Central has a tool of deferrals. What this allows the end user to do is, basically get rid of all of these prepaid tracking, expense workbooks that we see a lot of clients having. So, we have to have the end users to be able to, accept that we are changing the business process. Another great example is OCR technology. We've got ways to automate the AP invoice entry process. So, instead of having multiple staff sitting there keying in AP invoices, we can actually utilize some of the technology to help kind of automate that, and then that frees up our AP staff to focus in other areas. Another thing we see a lot that needs to be adapted to a new process is approvals. Typically, approvals are done through email. You got an email trail going back and forth between multiple people. Hey, is this approved? When we move into a new ERP system, we can actually bring that right inside Business Central. What that's going to allow is a better audit trail. If you ever have support or issues that come up, everything is traced and we don't have to have people digging through their inboxes. Another thing we want to make sure we do with these projects is we have some clients that come to us that ultimately are just wanting to take their current process that is in their legacy system and just plug that same exact process into the new system. You're losing a lot of value of upgrading your ERP by doing that. And so what we like to do is say, okay, we need to understand your current process, but what we need to do is figure out, what types of added functionality, added reporting can we get in the new system by doing it in a little bit different sort of fashion. Cecily, did you have a example here you wanted to kind of relate to?
Sure, yeah. We had a client, and this was kind of one of my fun clients. I really liked this one. But they did a lot of data entry just because that was the way that they did it. A lot of times when we get people moving from one system to another system, it's because I've used this system for such a long time and they used it a certain way because that's the way that system ran, or because at the time that was what was capable, right? So data storage was a big thing. So because of the data storage issues, they ended up having to summarize a lot of their sales invoice information and their purchase invoice information, because they do a lot of transactions on a weekly basis. And so to eliminate that need to constantly get more space and things like that, they ended up doing summary level transactions. As time's gone on, that data storage has become less and less of an issue. We can get lots of data if we need to with Business Central. And so they determined that they'd like to bring in the detailed information so that they could start to see more fundamentally business intelligent information that showed more things like where are they getting their sales from, what locations could they do more advertising in, what types of products are they selling over other products, all of this which they couldn't get because they were doing summary lump sum. Oh, we're just selling this lump sum at the end of the week. And so they were able to take a look at their process. Now their process was a little bit more difficult to start with because they had to put into place different processes that might take a little bit more time. But at the end of the day, the information that they were getting out was so much more valuable that that time being put into it was a great return on investment. And so we don't want to just take your current process and just kind of say, here, plop and fix it into BC, because we can do that. BC can pretty much do any process that you're doing now. But the process that you want is, how am I going to get more value by moving into a new system?
Yes. And a lot of times we see, to Cecily's example there, they may have been doing summary data just because their historical ERP system didn't allow them to import. So we have created a workaround in their legacy system, and just due to the capabilities of being able to import data into the new ERP, now we can get a whole nother data set of reporting, different functionality there. So really understand what the current process is and how can we make that more efficient in the new system. We don't want to just plug that same broken process into a new ERP. Okay. One of the other topics that we have found is very critical to a successful project is just the knowledge of the business process. There has been quite a few times, where there is just so much separation between, say, maybe the executive team and, the people that are down in the weeds day to day going through, their normal processes. And so, if we can have documented business processes, really helps us understand the process. And we have also found it really helps kind of get the client, everyone involved on the client side on the same page. Everyone's going to have, their day-to-day that they're doing, and just having that shared amongst the client team has found to be, very helpful. There is also the need for updating those business process documents. If you've got flowcharts and everything that are based around, say, QuickBooks, obviously that's going to change as we move into Business Central. So during the BC project, we can assist you guys in updating those business process documents so they are ready to go. There's also third-party plugins that kind of help automate that process. So putting screenshots and just directions as far as what the step-by-step process is inside BC. So business process knowledge is another key aspect of a successful project. Okay, flag plant. We talked about this just in our overall project approach. So flag plant, like I had mentioned, is what is the end goal we are trying to achieve with this implementation? So, we try to keep this as process oriented as possible. I don't want a flag plant to be move into Business Central. We like to try to be able to make it measurable. So we've got an example here. Project success will allow ABC company to unify business data, financial and accounting, to have a high-level insight into trends and provide a lens that will allow predictability for the company to make true strategic decisions. As a company that's currently transitioning from a startup to positioning themselves as a major market player, the ability to slice and dice all data into clean reporting will be absolutely essential. So as we're moving through, this project specifically, we, reference this flag plant consistently to make sure, on the last point, the ability to slice and dice all data. We need to make sure as we're creating the foundation, whether it be the chart of accounts, the dimensions, all those different data sets, those have to be built, in the original project to make sure at the end of the day, you are able to slice and dice by those different data sets. So the flag plant we have found to be, very critical. We just kind of rolled this out within the last 2 years at JourneyTEAM, and we have had a lot of great feedback on it. It's nice to kind of keep that end goal in mind and make sure that we don't end up with a different result than what we originally started to do. Okay. So that was kind of our top 5 list of the characteristics and attributes of a successful implementation. We do have some other project considerations, and these weren't kind of just one-word notes. These are just kind of more of different things we've seen with different projects. Some of these have resulted in a very positive effect. Some of these have been more of a hindrance. So first one I want to talk about is this depth in key positions. So, as we move through a project, obviously like your controller, the AP manager, the AR manager, we are going to need a lot of their time. They're going to be involved in creating the system the way it needs to be, making decisions throughout the process. A lot of the times they're also involved in support and training internally for their team. And so we want to make sure that, if we're going to be utilizing, the controller very heavily, it may be beneficial to try to train other resources on some of the tasks that that person is doing so they've got more time to focus on the project. So anytime we can add a couple more layers to some of these key positions, really helps us kind of move through the project without having one or more people being a bottleneck.
I was going to say the only thing that I'd add into that one is as you do those layers, one of the things that gives you as well is it gives you that backup. So if you're kind of training them to be that backup for that key position, it makes it really easy for them to also flow into Business Central and learn the new process in Business Central because they've already understood what the process is and now they just need to be trained on the process in BC. So that gives you your backups as well. So that depth in key positions, not just for the project, but going forward in any type of a company, you want that depth in any position. So that just kind of gets you a kickstart going if you haven't already got that.
Thank you. Another thing that we have found to be very beneficial on projects is having an internal project manager. So every project we do at JourneyTEAM, we will assign a JourneyTEAM resource to be the project manager. So they help, coordinate any status calls. They help with the kickoff, the project retrospective. So our PM does get very involved in the project. Having a project manager on the client side also helps, kind of expedite this process. So if we have someone that, isn't required for the technical tasks, but more so being able to coordinate with our internal project manager, as well as the different resources on the client side, really helps kind of keep tasks going in the way they're needing to go, monitor status. Any time we need to bring in like a third party, internal project managers can be very beneficial there as well. If there ever comes questions with billing, usually that's something we can just, have the client's PM and JourneyTEAM's PM kind of work out and address any of those questions. We have engaged in a couple projects where there's actually a third-party consultant involved. So, ABC company hires ABC consulting firm, and then the consulting firm comes and finds JourneyTEAM to help implement the project. One thing we have found with this that I hope it's not a constant thing, but it seems to be that the accountability, one of the first things we talked about, that gets to be to the point where it's not clear and defined. So some of the projects we've seen, with that third-party consultant, we don't know, is the third-party consultant managing and getting these tasks completed, or is the client doing this? And so it gets a little bit of a hot potato game. It seems like where it's bouncing back and forth. And so if we have, just a clear communication with the client directly, it helps kind of, instill that accountability factor in where it needs to sit.
Yeah, and that's not saying that third-party consultants, we can't have a successful project. We absolutely can. It's just that when we do have a third-party consultant, we're going to push really hard for that accountability, because that is one of the core functionalities of a successful implementation. And we want to make sure that not only is that third-party consultant accountable for what's going on, but so is the client. So it really just comes back to that. We really need somebody that is in, because at the end of the day, that third-party consultant's going to go away at some point in time. Who's going to be the person, the go-to in your company that is going to help drive that project moving forward? And when I say that project, all projects really, I mean, they end, but at the end of the day, we all want to improve every single day. So can we improve processes over and over and over again? Absolutely. So who is the one person that's really going to be that key player for Business Central? And they need to stick with it and be that person throughout.
Thank you. Okay, oh, whoops, didn't mean to click again. Okay, another project consideration would be trying to do like a phased approach. We have had quite a few clients come to us and they have a large complex project. This can sometimes be overwhelming. If we're moving over to, CRM and a new payroll system and a new ERP system, the daunting task of trying to flip the switch and have all of those turn on at the same time is very overwhelming. We've done it, but it takes a very dedicated client to make that successful. So what we have found is trying to phase the project can be very beneficial. So for example, maybe we are doing phase one. Phase one would be just the general ledger. We're going to get the banking up and going, and we're going to do the accounts payable. JourneyTEAM, we use the acronym MVP for a minimum viable product. So this is, what is the bare minimum we need to be able to start working inside this new system. So once that gets up and going, maybe we come in with a phase two where we bring in accounts receivable and a third-party extension for credit card processing. And then once that's done and completed, the phase three would be to turn on the integration with maybe an e-commerce site. So what this allows it to do is everyone can stay more focused on the current task at hand. That helps prioritize certain things, and really have a better understanding of when these deadlines need to happen and how are we actually going to get it done. So if we are starting a larger complex project, we will usually try to push and determine if there is a possibility of doing this in different phases. The other area that we want to talk about, and this wasn't in the project considerations or the original list, but just the concept of adoption and change management. One of the biggest things we have seen with unsuccessful projects is just the people internally in the organization actually wanting to do this change and buying off that this change is what we should be doing. So, some of the main challenges and pain points is you've got users hesitant and resistant changing, duplication from manual entries. You got multiple systems making it a challenge to access your data. How to actually measure the success and organizational impact. And then, what's the IT cost of having multiple systems? And so we try to outline, what are the main pain points of this, and then really try to focus on what are the benefits. If we move over to this new system, we are going to have increased productivity. We will be able to automate some of our processes. Eventually, we'll get to a point where there is a lower operating cost. So really just trying to, have everyone in your organization sign off that, this is the transition we want to make. It may get a little more painful before it gets easier. Sometimes that is the approach we have to take, because it can be a little more painful as we're going through and trying to get this new process trained to everyone. But at the end of the day, we got to keep our eyes at the light at the end of the tunnel to know that this is going to get easier. It is going to give us more access to more reports and more data, and hopefully able to make better business decisions. So with JourneyTEAM, kind of as John mentioned, we've got a whole bunch of employees. We've got close to about 20 different people on the ERP team. We have determined that this is something that we need a dedicated team to help and manage. So within the last year, I believe, JourneyTEAM actually kind of created this department for adoption and change management. So if your company thinks that you're gonna have struggles with trying to get this adoption internally, we do have a dedicated team that can kind of help guide you guys through that process.
And it's kind of a cool process. They come in and they'll do workshops with you. They'll talk about how you can communicate better with your employees, how you can teach them why it's important to do the changes, because a lot of times, as I go back to my analogy of being a parent, we always go and we tell our kids, just do it because I said to. Well, sometimes that doesn't quite work. I mean, I would love to be able to just tell my kids, do it because I said to, and they just do it. But my kids kind of think that they have a mind of their own and they want to understand why I told them to do it. Don't cross the road right now because there's a car coming, you're going to get hit, kind of scenario. Whereas I just said, don't cross the road. They look at me and they go, well, I want to, so I'm going to cross it anyway. And then they cross the road and get hit. So a lot of times it's the communication. When we do these implementations, especially coming from, some of these programs that don't have the gap compliance, I think that's one of the parts that is really, really hard. It's a hard change to make. Well, I can change that transaction anytime I want in my old system. So what if I make a mistake, right? Well, we're moving, we're growing up, and we're trying to be a company that is gap compliant. Therefore, we need a system that is gap compliant. That means that when you enter a transaction, you need to be accountable, enter the transaction the correct way, because we can't just willy-nilly change that if you've made a mistake to it. It's then has to be voided and put in the correct way. So clearly communicating to them why you're trying to do something and what it's going to give them will help to kind of go over some of those pain points that comes to you with change points or change management. And so this department allows them to go in and have workshops with your employees and talk through why that piece is so important. We train you how to talk to them. We train the employees why we need to do that. And at the end of the day, we talk about reporting and what it's going to give you. So a lot of benefits from even just knowing that change management is an issue. If you don't want us to come in and do a whole scenario, just knowing that that can be an issue in your company, sitting down and having that conversation before you start a project is a big key piece of any successful implementation, because there's nothing worse for Jesse and I to be sitting in the middle of a workshop showing them how to do a certain process, and we get 3 different people saying, but I can do it this way in my other system. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know why we have to do it this way? And getting a lot of pushback, that's very difficult, and it kind of brings a negative vibe to the implementation. So kind of addressing those up front is very helpful for a successful implementation. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think we see the most uphill battle of clients from coming from QuickBooks. QuickBooks is one of the more common ERP systems out there, and it lets you do a lot of things that an accountant wouldn't want you to do. So, getting your users to understand the reason of, yes, this may take, more to actually enter. I can't just go change the transaction after it's been posted, but there's a reason behind that. We are trying to move to a gap compliant system. We want to be able to audit these books and trace all these different transactions. And in your legacy system, you wouldn't be able to do that. So getting the users to buy onto the reason of why we are doing this can make a great impact.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That's about all the content we had for today's session. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this information was valuable. Whether you're looking to start a project or you're currently involved with one. Do see some familiar faces in here that I'm currently involved with on a project. So I hope this was valuable and helpful to you guys.